Welcome to You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. It's time to make our way across the universe and talk all things John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Welcome along to episode number 1 of You Can Talk to Me, a Beatles podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Michael Croaker. I firstly want to thank the many terrific Beatles podcasts already out there. Many known to you, I'm sure, but they've each, in their own way, been a great inspiration. It's my hope that this pod brings you something fresh and engaging to regularly wrap your ears around. We're kicking off with a series of eps with the Beatlegs, one of Australia's leading Beatles tribute bands. My brother Shaun plays John and is the founding member. He'll be along also for many future episodes. His good friend is Paul Van Acker, who plays Paul in the band. And I thought that getting these two together to talk about the passion, the songs, and the unique musician's perspective about the Beatles would be a terrific launch point for the podcast. We'll meet the rest of the guys on the eps that immediately follow over the coming weeks. Now, you'll find You Can Talk to Me on Facebook and Instagram, so if you enjoy the listen, please also be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and link up with us on the socials. All right, let's get to it. We had a terrific conversation together, a lot of fun, and it began with my asking Paul, how long have you guys been making music together?
We've been together for 40 years.
Too bloody long.
When did you first start playing?
I think we started playing, about 12, 13 years ago.
You must be close to that.
Something like that.
Be close to that, definitely.
It seems longer.
And I think the band's been going itself for about 15 or 16 maybe now, if you're telling me that.
When did you first come across the Beatles, Paul, when you were a young guy?
Yeah, I remember when I sort of have memories of singing songs with some of my family members. You know, we'd just sing along and they all loved the Beatles, so I kind of grew up on them because they had it, and my brother had the Beatles box collection, getting a bit older into it. And
the blue box?
No, it was a brown box. Like the actual case, I think it had 8 albums.
Right.
And it had the case was sort of like in the shape of like an old crate.
Yeah.
That was the Reader's Digest
Yeah,
box
that
set.
sounds like the Beatles box.
Yeah, it was a box collection.
It was Reader's Digest brought it out. It used to come through the shop I had.
Yeah, it was all LP and it was fabulous, you know, and so we'd listen to those. And, of course, when I started getting albums, I thought, they've missed a lot of songs on this, you know. But that's how it started with my family.
And when did you pick up an instrument? What was the first instrument that you found yourself attracted to?
First thing I had to pick up was a recorder at school. Pretty bad. But I started playing drums at school, in primary school, and really enjoyed that. And then going into... In fact, my grade 7 teacher said to me, you should probably think about a career in music. That's kind of where he got me started. And but I was already kind of half, that'd be good.
Yeah.
And then I got into clarinet at school. Yeah. I started playing keyboards then at about 18, 19 or so. And... that was basically all I did for 20 years. And then somebody said in another Beatles band, the Beatles, who are since defunct, but they said, we want you to play McCartney in a Beatles show. I said, well, there's a problem. 1, I don't play bass guitar, and 2, I don't have the range of McCartney. That didn't worry them. They said, no, we love your piano. You can do the rest with the piano and just do the bass. And so I learned bass guitar. Right-handed at that stage, and I had my first gig a month later, so I can only imagine what that must have sounded like.
That's a pretty daunting idea for someone to jump in. What made you think, I'm going to commit to this? Where'd that confidence come from?
I think I just thought, I'm going to give this a go. I loved the bass. I always sang bass lines in my head anyway, and I just thought, I'll get a Hofner replica at the time. And started having a go. My first song was Ticket to Ride because I thought, okay, I thought I can probably learn that pretty quickly, which I did. Probably not very well, but I still did, and just moved on to their set list from there, and that's where I started playing bass.
What about you, Shaun? If you go back in time, obviously we're brothers. I know some of how the music came into our lives, but can you talk about your first time hearing the Beatles and what that did to you?
I'd say it'd have to be, I think, the Beatles cartoon maybe, was it? When we first started hearing their songs. Maybe heard them on the radio, but didn't realise it at that time because we didn't know maybe. But yeah, I think it was the Beatles cartoon. that came on. So it must have been about 76, was it, or 77?
When did you pick up the guitar?
I didn't really pick up the guitar till I was playing the drums first at 14, I think, or 13, 14, and then I started the guitar at 17, I think. It was 17, yeah.
As a guitarist, what was it about that Beatles songbook that caught you as a player?
Well, I learnt to play because I knew the chords. Because I knew the songs. It was easy for me to get. I thought, well, what's going to be easy here? So I know all the Beatles melodies and rhythm. I got an understanding of it. I thought I did. Well, I must have done because that's what sort of taught me how to play the guitar. So I got the chord book and a chord Bible, obviously a chord diary where you could look up the chords. So I looked at the word, go to say, I want to hold your hand, and then look at where the chord changes were, work out how to play those chords, and then, worked it from there.
And we're still pre-digital age. And I remember you guys will know the story, McCartney in the anthology talking about when they'd heard about that magical chord B7 and that a kid somewhere across town
knew how to play it,
knew what a B7 was. And it was like, well, let's get on our bikes and go find this guy. And
it was a mission.
Yeah. What was that exploration like for you in a pre-digital age where you were looking for chords, looking to understand how those songs were built?
Well, they were easy because it had dots and told you where to put your fingers on the frets. So, and once you understood that, then you understood. But then you also realised later on down the track that the keys that they were putting in some of these books weren't the correct key that were on the album either. But it learned. It like I said, once you learnt the Beatles music's great because it encompasses everything you pretty much need to know. It's all rock. There's rock and roll blues. There's different augmented chords and, the sevenths and the minor suspended fourths and stuff like that. So they use all the chords in their music. So you get it's a good way to start learning guitar would be to listen to their music, to learn against it if you wanted to. That makes sense.
It's well said. What about you, Paul? What is it you think about, as Shaun said, about that catalogue of songs that make it built to last and make it generational? What's going on there in terms of structure?
I think certainly the earlier songs are probably a little bit easier to play for most guitarists as far as general chords go. I mean, there's not any. A lot of people say, "Oh, they're just 2-chord songs." They're really not. They're not that simple. But they're very, very catchy. They're very much in a key that most people should be able to sing in, and they're just a hell of a lot of fun to play as well, just in general. And as you get into their catalogue and their career, it gets more complicated, and it's a bit like it's almost like they're learning as they're going in their albums, and so we too can learn that same way in a lot of ways. Not exactly chronicle, but in a lot of ways it's sort of they're growing as they're going.
Well, but you're saying the basic chord structures in the first couple of albums, which progress to Rubber Soul, where they're starting to use capos and augmented ninths and stuff like that, and sevenths and suspended fourths. And,
that's right.
Yeah,
they're getting into it a lot more, and they're basically exploring as they're going, and it's just it's like any guitarist would want to do. They would have started getting into this sort of stuff as well. So at the same time,
for sure.
Yeah, and just at the end of it, the songs are just brilliantly written. They're just little pieces of craft, and they're just beautiful, all of them. So,
as a player, can you remember a moment where you thought, as you were learning those songs and starting to understand them, I guess from a bass perspective with McCartney, is there a recording, an album, a moment? It might just be a piece where you thought, as you listened to it, he's doing something he hasn't done before. That's new ground. And do you know where that comes in?
I would say you're getting towards more experimental albums like around Rubber Soul and everything. Some of that fuzz guitar on Revolver, those sort of experimental ways of doing it, that's very cool. Not terribly difficult, but just sound different and just very, very encapsulating in as far as advancing the sounds.
Like Taxman bass line is...
Yeah.
It's like funk.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the groove that...
things like that, Day Tripper, songs like that, challenging to play, but also a hell of a lot of, technique going into the way that he does it as well. So, I mean, for me, you can tell that he's on his chops already just by, I saw her standing there. Together they'd already been playing.
Or the first
for years.
industrial love song.
Yeah, absolutely. All My Loving, it's a lovely walking bass there, which is fun to play. But, stuff like, I saw her standing there. He's in the studio. It's only the first album I've ever done.
First song.
One of the first songs, and bang, there's that thumping bass line. And it's like, wow, I mean, the guys have been playing already for quite a few years before that. So it's not it's not the first time he's ever sort of done this sort of thing, but it's just, it just hits you. It's like, wow, you set off right beginning. If it's the first song you've ever heard from the Beatles, you go, well, there's a quality bass player just there, just immediately.
It's a hell of an opening for a band's debut, the confidence of that opening track.
Yeah.
Even the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the key hit for a rock and roll song.
Yeah.
The element is 1, 2, 3, 4. That is your studio timing. That's everything. And to say it and rock it out like that's really cool.
And the way the 4 is really accented, and we do that when we do it live. People can see what song we're going to do immediately, and they're already on the dance floor. It's great.
Yeah, it's in the DNA.
Absolutely, yeah.
What about when you go back to those early recordings from Lennon, Shaun, with 63, 64, the rhythm guitar playing, for example, that's happening on All My Lovin'? That seems to be a great example of a very quick bit of evolution for Lennon as a player, or is it?
It is, yeah. No, it's a shuffle. I'm not too sure. Did John come up with the idea? I'm guessing he did. So, it's a shuffle. It's a shuffle, and it is really. You'd have to be on your game when you're playing it because it's so easy to get out of sync with that shuffle. So the timing has got to be right on the money with that song when you do it live. So it is, and it drives the song through, and it makes it a more of a the rock ballad style song, probably one of the first rock ballads, as you say. But yeah, that's if you wanted to.
Can you hear in them right from the beginning? You've got McCartney, who's probably the more polished player and more rounded, but then you've got Lennon, who I think even described himself as primitive. But that element then of those two forces coming together is probably where some of the magic is, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it would be with rhythms, Lennon's attacky rhythm and McCartney's flowing bass lines, and McCartney's rounded vocal and Lennon's more nasally attackful sort of vocal, and it sort of works. It tends to work.
I think that's the same for their songwriting as well. The two of them get together.
Personality, is evident in their songwriting as well. Exactly the same as far as the playing goes.
Yeah. Did you find that daunting at the beginning of it all, when you really think about it? We're going up on stage, you're putting on the suits, you're doing the whole production, and you're playing those songs as those characters essentially. And for people, there's that bit of theatre. Is it ever daunting? Was it daunting at the start? It's probably a bit more relaxed now, but there's an honouring of the music that has to happen there.
Yeah, you have to be on your game.
Was it at first a little bit daunting? Like those harmonies are so signature, particularly for the two players that you guys are. How much work went into just making sure you got to a point where you could very quickly relax into the blending of the harmonies, the playing? It
was always pretty easy, wasn't it, for us, because we knew the music so well.
Yeah, we had it down.
Sometimes we'd pull each other up and go, no, that's not right, especially with me. So you need to go here. Oh, really? Are you sure about that? So then we'd...
Yeah, especially with the third harmony when you have George in as well, we'd maybe go through a few things just to make sure we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing. But I think because we've grown up with these songs and we've sung these songs and know the harmonies and everything so well, that for us it was kind of second nature almost, to copy, But we certainly wanted to give it the respect it deserved and get it right, and I think we do that right.
Yeah, you're either playing, like I said to Michael, you're either playing it right or you're not, or you're either doing it right or you're not.
Yeah.
Sometimes we struggle as we're, getting older in our age. Sometimes we struggle vocally on stage, and we do. And you try but you punch through it. You keep punching through it. Sometimes some nights you hit the notes, some nights you don't.
Sometimes you're playing rhythm guitar. Sometimes you play the fool.
Sometimes you play the bass. We swap around too.
We do.
Well, in that space, is there a song, Paul, from a McCartney perspective, that when you're on stage, you look forward to playing it because there's something about, there's a fun and a joy in playing it? What song leaps out at you?
Actually, even though it's not a Paul song, Something. I just love that bass line, that beautiful melodic bass line. and then I get to sing the harmonies along with George, and that's just what a privilege to do that. But also, songs like Day Tripper, they're a challenge to play and sing, and it's a fantastic John song, and I could play those two songs every gig.
What was the magic about that bass line in Something? Because it is an incredible bit of work, and it's got its recognition. But from a player's perspective, what's that like to play that line and be inside it?
What I love about it is the light and shade that it has. It shines in certain moments. Lets George do what he has to do when he's singing and everything like that. But there are also, parts there, like in the solo, where the bass comes in and basically is sort of playing along with the guitar. Having a sort of a game together there. In musical terms, it's just an amazing show of just how well he's been able to come in and out when it's necessary, but at the same time, it's just melodic throughout the whole way. It's very McCartney, and it's a beautiful thing to hear and play.
I remember hearing George comment that he thought it was too busy, and they obviously had their tensions, but I always thought McCartney was obviously excited by it, and then thought, oh, wow, I'm going to really dive in here and honour this because it's a great piece of music.
Well, I think so too. And I think the thing is, he doesn't do it in every song. It's not like he's all over the place in every song, so to speak. But so I think it is an honour to George. I think George might not have been in the best of moods when he said something like that, perhaps. Who knows?
Yeah, that's right.
Because really, it suits beautifully the song. I wouldn't change a note.
It's funny for that tension they had, because when you go back through the history, George always had Paul show up for sessions. Paul was always there, even at the end. And for a lot of them, Lennon's not there. And yet he seemed to be cooler with Lennon for most of the time. But Paul showed up. Paul was always there for him. Let's lay some harmonies. Let's put some bass here. What can I do here for that? History tells us that. It's just funny that tension was there. What about from a Lennon perspective, Shaun? What's a song that you just go, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I can sit in this and really revel in it.
It's funny. I don't really have a standout. To me, it's the show. I just rock. We just rock through them. She Loves You is always fun because it's a really good rock song. Really, just the way it starts with the big drums.
Yeah. Well, you've had decades of listening to the nice polished version on the album, and ours is quite a polished version as well. But it does have a slight rawness to it just because we're playing live. And I think you can't. Doesn't matter how good a recording is, you won't get that on a recording. So when you're hearing a band play it pretty close to how it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%.
We're very close. But we're playing live, and you've got these four instruments all playing that sound's going to hit you.
Yeah.
And
it's a thick song. There's no gaps in it. It's all...
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like I rediscovered that song watching you guys play that. It's like when you go back and look at the Beatles at the Washington Coliseum in '64, and particularly Long Tall Sally as the closer. They're on fire.
Yeah, Ringo's on fire.
They're just
the skids.
They're looking at each other. They're opening it up.
Yeah,
and there's just a full attack.
Yeah.
That's when the buzz hits you. That's when you start buzzing from the crowd and the music, and it's all happening. They're special moments. That was a special moment.
The magic in the Beatles was obviously those harmonies too, and particularly between Lennon and McCartney. I know we talked a little bit about that. Was there a song or a moment where you both kind of knew, okay, we've got this? And what song was that where you knew this has to land?
Nowhere Man for me, because we're going to hit it straight off the mark.
Yeah.
There's no guitar, there's nothing. It's just like, and we're straight into it, so vocally, I won't sing it now, but yeah. But it's for us, you've got to be on key too. So I'll be honest with you, I'll hit the old E note, just E, just so I know where I'm at. And then we hit it. But that's I love doing that.
Yeah.
I love that song. It's the slowest song we probably do when we do it. When we don't play it all the time. But it's great, and Sammy just nails that solo so good.
Sam plays George, who we've got coming up in an episode as well. What about for you, Paul? A harmony that maybe in the early years together where you went, oh, we've got this.
I I love I Feel Fine, I think is always a very, very cool, again, the three of us. We do This Boy occasionally. And,
We do.
That's really, that's about as good as it gets for me as far as doing a close harmony. There's nowhere to hide. You get your notes right, or it'll be noticeable to everyone. And I just love doing that sort of thing. That's, any song that we've got a harmony, you've really got to nail. And we do.
Yeah, we do.
And,
we do.
So it's to me, I love them all.
What do people not appreciate about that band maybe that a musician would? The general listener will feel it and fall in love with it. What will a musician tell you about what's special?
Anyone who's tried to play the songs, they all, you listen to it, go, oh, that's easy, that's easy. Try playing it, for the first time. There's a guy that in another Beatles band that I was doing before this one, who was coming in to play George. He goes, oh yeah, that should be fine. And he came out and he goes, how does he do this? I can't play the way that George is doing. What the, like that sort of thing all the time. It didn't help when I said to him, no, we're actually an Elvis tribute. But because a lot of people, because they haven't played it, they're a bit shocked that it's actually a lot harder than it looks. Trying to play Ringo is a lot harder than it looks. Everybody, anyone who plays the actual songs will tell you that. A lot of people who've never played a Beatles song will go, oh, Ringo, well, that's easy. He's not that good.
It's because what's happening, and that critique you get, that's from people, that's from generations, not generations, well, only a couple of generations, but that's the time has passed and a lot's happened. And when you go back to listening, but the understanding is the Beatles at that time, even those songs, they changed the journey of how it's going to be, really. So, do you know what I mean when they say, oh, Ringo that or whatever the case is, like you're saying? But it was appropriate at the time.
Absolutely.
And it probably didn't get any better than that at the time.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. And, of course, they were growing as they were going as well. I still maintain that anybody who wants to, say that they're bigger than the Beatles or whatever, and, good luck.
Yeah. Their middle eights was something else, and that seemed to be a big key part of these turns in songs, making them stick out. And they often wouldn't go back and repeat, like that shift that happens in No Reply. I can still remember being a kid, like 8 or 9, on vinyl, and hearing that change for the first time and getting tingles. I still remember that feeling. Now we're kind of diluted in being over familiar. But when I first heard No Reply, I remember that shift and I got tingles in my body. Oh, wow, listen to that.
And the hand claps that just make it change.
And there's an excitement in there and this great shift that you don't hear coming. And then they never go back to it.
Yeah.
And then they never repeat that same thing again thereafter. That little moment's gone.
It's like eating a chocolate and getting to that sweet part.
Yeah.
And just going, wow, that was so good.
And you can go through them. We can work it out. It goes on and on. From a musician's perspective, what are your thoughts around the middle eights?
Well, I have the same feeling with...
We often talk about it backstage, if we're singing a song and go, that is such a cool middle section, mate. Yeah. We always talk about that.
Yeah. Things we said today,
Love it.
A minor song, suddenly into A major, and it's just like, wow,
It's a lift.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl when they hit that moment and McCartney makes that shift, and there's already the sound of a jet engine with an audience, and when that shift comes in and the pace picks up, that volume lifts again.
Yeah.
So it must have been so visceral back in the day.
Absolutely. It would have been a hell of a thing to see them live, I think. Wouldn't you love to just be part of that?
It would have been good
to see it. Yeah.
So if you had to call it, and I know it can change on any given day with this band, favourite middle eight, Shaun?
Favourite middle eight, gosh. Even... I don't want to spoil the party's got a great middle eight. Though tonight she's made me sad.
Yeah.
I still...
So that's almost a whole song inside a song.
That's correct. That could be something else, something special.
Take that out and...
I've always liked that middle eight.
Yeah.
But for me, oh wow, that is such a tough question, mate. There's so many of them, but I'd have to probably agree with you with No Reply. I like the way the hand claps come in and the whole tempo changes and gives that slightly Spanish feel about it. I love it.
What about you?
I mean, if you can call it a middle eight, I would have to say McCartney with Day in the Life. Woke up.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I mean, that is so much fun. All of a sudden,
it's so hard to pick.
I know,
it is.
but it's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, they tell the story like it's similar to how you'd watch a film. There's the build up. There's similar dynamics in their songs.
Girl. That's the one I was thinking of.
Brilliant middle eight, yeah. Especially the way the guitar...
Yeah, and the backing vocal.
And the way the guitar changes as well.
Naughty boys.
The way the guitar sort of strums back and forth.
Where do you think they took that lesson? As players, where do you think they took... McCartney obviously had that history with his father and...
Yeah, because before that, your rock and roll 12-bar blues and your Little Richard and your Chuck Berrys and your... It
was straight ahead, wasn't it?
It was, where you had your simple verses and your chorus. Basically, there was usually no middle eight. Then you'd have your guitar solo, and that'd be your break. But in saying that too, I'm sure that's not associated with every song from the 50s. But you're still talking early days. Let's face it, rock and roll. Let's say 54, 55 at its best was sort of when it was starting to ignite or become something. And the Beatles were 62. So you're talking 7 years, and they're throwing middle eights in and stuff and writing their own material and doing all that. So there wasn't too much of it going on before that, except Chuck Berry was a great songwriter.
Great lyricist.
Great lyricist, yeah. Or in general, great songs.
Yeah.
Great, same with Little Richard, but essentially rock and roll, the 12-bar blues, which is where rock and roll's come from, obviously. And the Beatles... The Beatles just took it to the next level.
Yeah, well, they were developing as they went, of course. And, I mean, they would say that McCartney said himself, From Me to You was exciting. I got arms that long to hold you. It's like, whoa, we're going to go from there to here now. They were both. They were looking at each other going, whoa, check this out. What have we done?
I'm so glad you brought that up. That's obviously in Anthology. He says that.
Yeah.
That was a moment.
There wasn't a lot of that going on previously.
Yeah.
No.
Before the Beatles.
I mean, I love playing that song just for that part.
I mean, I'm sure I could be proven wrong there too, but not to the extent of, the storytelling, songwriting adventures, because each Beatles song's an adventure.
Yeah.
You don't, especially when you're listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, wouldn't you love to go back and listen to it for the first time ever? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah,
it's funny you should say that. I remember Dad telling a story of when he was dating Mum and he was living in Melbourne and he was picking her up or taking her out for lunch. She was working in a retail store and it was 1966. And he told the story of going in to wait for her to finish and be ready for lunch. And it was like a clothing store. And he said, I'm standing in there and the radio was playing. It's the transistor radio playing on the counter. And the DJ came on and said, coming up next, the brand new single from the Beatles. And he said, the rooms suddenly went quiet. People stopped talking and chatter and people asking other people to shush. And they played Day Tripper. And he said, I can still remember hearing that opening. And he said, I can still remember everyone stopped and no one was self-conscious about it. We all just stopped and listened because this was the new Beatles. And it made me realise we haven't lived through that kind of experience. But he was saying it was such a cultural thing that you just stopped walking. And if someone said, this is the new Beatles song, I remember, I think it was Paul Weller who said that he was driving in 1967 and the radio was playing and the DJ said, coming up the new single for the Beatles. And he pulled over to the side of the road because he had to, because Strawberry Fields was getting played. And he was driving as it was playing. And
he knew he needed to soak it in.
He knew he had to pull over because it was like, what's happening?
Because it deserves that.
What is happening?
Yeah.
What's this?
It's like it's a new novel coming out by your favourite author.
Yes.
You're reading it for the first time. I can't wait to read the next one. But it's like a 3-minute or 2.5-minute, 3-minute extravaganza of an amazing adventure, or you just don't know what especially back then, you'd think, what am I going to get? Michael would bring home a Beatle record when we were young fellas and we hadn't heard it,
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so Revolver or something, you go, wow, this is different.
Yeah.
And we were listening to that for the first time. You know what I mean? And wow, this is great. And then you hear it again and again.
Yeah. I can still remember the first time I'd ever heard "And Your Bird Can Sing," and it was in the Beatles cartoon that caught me. But of course, I didn't know where do you find that? And
well, back then there was nowhere to find it.
No, you didn't know where that was. It was just in a cartoon. And then being at school, and a kid brought in his mum and dad's 1962 to 66, 63 to 66, and the Red Album.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid in class and just looking at the cover and just thinking how cool they looked. I just thought, look how cool these guys are. I don't know if anyone would think that now, but they looked cool. And
they always looked cool. And they still hold that credibility.
Yeah, they do. And I said to my eldest daughter, Tani, the other night, she came home and said, "Oh, Dad, I've been listening to a Beatles playlist and some of it's great." And she was telling me some songs. And she said they played everything. I said, yeah, they did. And they're almost 3 bands in one. You get a boy band in the matching suits. You get a studio rock band.
Yeah.
Then you get a psychedelic psych pop band.
And if you like, you get a heavy hard rocking band
at the end. So it's almost like 4 bands.
I still say that Helter Skelter is the first. That to me is like the true birth of rock and roll. Heavy metal, because it is.
John will tell you that I Feel Fine gave birth to Jimi Hendrix. but he was excited by that. 100%. I remember hearing Lennon say how heavy the drums were on Ticket to Ride. And I remember hearing an interview where he was saying, you go back and listen, those drums are so heavy. No one was doing drums that heavy in 65. And I remember thinking, those drums aren't... Then as I've gotten older and gone back, and they're big drums. That's a big drum-driven sound in 1965.
The only other one that I can say that had the big drum sound was the Richard. That's just huge, big drum sound. Yeah, massive drum sound. I'm a big fan. And so have the Beatles, obviously. But he was an innovator too, you know. But he had a big drum sound. That's what I like about it. The Beatles did have a big drum sound too.
Yeah.
You can see the excitement in their faces when they're so young, sitting with little Richard, and they're gathered around. If you look at that photo and really have a look at it,
he's got their hands.
He's holding their hands, and you look at their faces; they're just kids.
Yeah.
And you can see in their eyes, I can't believe we're sitting with him.
Well, to me, you're sitting with the true king of rock and roll.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he was the true king of rock and roll. I mean, no one rocked like Little Richard. And you can see why McCartney's such a big fan and covers his stuff as well, because he can hit those notes, you know.
Yeah, his vocal range.
Yeah, and he does the best cover versions of those songs.
Yeah.
You know, and the Beatles did the best cover versions of Chuck Berry stuff as well. Buddy Holly, you know.
I only just recently heard the original version of Bad Boy.
Yeah,
and it's layered with cheese.
Yeah.
It's layered with
Lennon's
cheese.
reworking is
with
brilliant.
The backing harmony. He's a bad boy.
Yeah.
Then you hear what Lennon did to it with that band, and it's a throwaway.
Yeah,
it's a throwaway, but it completely reinvents that song, and it's got so much bite in it.
Oh, just that intro. Bam, bam,
but if you listen to the original, there's nothing like that in there. But he could hear it. And they could obviously mine those covers. Leave My Kitten Alone.
Yeah.
Twist and Shout goes without saying.
Yeah.
Goes on and on.
Well, everyone associates Twist and Shout with the Beatles now.
Because they quite literally reclaimed it.
That's right. That's correct, yes.
Same as, not as well known, but Till There Was You, from a musical.
Yeah.
How good is that?
Yeah,
the Music Man, they can take that from a musical and, give it a whole new sort of birth.
On that, George's playing is
it's magnificent.
It's magnificent, mate. And that is a showpiece of. I mean, that's Chet Atkins style there, right there.
And he's a kid.
And he's a kid, man.
In the Ed Sullivan Show, the Royal Command performance. Yeah. And he's note perfect.
You know what I like about George's? You know what I like about the Beatles? This is off the cuff little thing, but what I like about Beatle music, and I try and explain it to sound guys, and in the situation where we do have a different sound guy, I've even said it to our sound guy that George's solos come out and attack you. They come out, not attack you, but they're in your...
They're up front.
They're up front. Everything cruises, but you need... Because that's what makes his guitar so... What's the word? So...
It's identifiable.
Synonymous, I suppose, would be the word. Yeah. It's such a heavy ingredient to that music. And the way that it comes out. Like we're doing a Sora standing there, and he does all the little notes in between, and they pop out and they sit back into the mix. Then when they come out at you again, It's almost like three-dimensional when you listen
A
to it.
little do.
Yeah. All the little,
yeah.
just all the little if you listen to "Please Please Me," especially, it really delivers in that mark, especially in "Saw Her Standing There" and songs like that. Yeah, it really chunks out really great.
If you had to call it, I know it can change on any given day, is there an album, Paul, that you go back to? Because for me, I can tell you what I think is their greatest album. I can tell you what I think is my favourite. I can tell you what I think is their most important, because I think they all fall into their own categories. Yeah. If you had to pick an album that you go back to, what would it be and why?
The one I always go back to probably is Revolver, because you've got so many different genres of different styles, and some of the best songs they ever did were on that album. But then that's today. Yeah. Tomorrow it's going to be Abbey Road, and next day it's going to be
They've all got their sweet spots in your heart.
Yeah, but something about Revolver, just everything on that album's magic. I mean, in most albums it is, but there's always one or two that you won't listen to quite as much. But for me, Rubber Soul and Revolver really have been made.
I think they're completely different. I do honestly think they're completely separated from me. I don't see, and even the Beatles think they're close, but
George did particularly because he remembered being happy. On both those albums. But I think they feel different too from a production perspective.
100%.
Rubber Soul feels, as we talked before, it's acoustic. It feels warm. I always found Revolver feels steely. It feels a little.
Yeah, it is, especially when you're going to open it like Taxman. But for me, those are the two albums that I go to back the most. But then I love Help as well.
Yeah, so do I. It's my first album proper.
The thing with those Beatles albums, like Please Please Me, you listen to it, and then another song comes on, and another song. You just see, you forget that they're cram-packed with so much goodness in the ingredients.
Yeah.
When you talk about Revolver, can you imagine 1966, 3 years before you're singing From Me to You to an audience, and now you're doing Tomorrow Never Knows, and then you finish with that. So the last thing they hear is Tomorrow Never Knows, and it's like, we're going to leave you that. And think, how do you possibly go forward from there? And then they do what they do next.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling, and people. I don't want to sound like my dad or anything, but people today just don't get it because it's all there for them already.
Yes,
they don't get to grow with it.
No,
it's like my boys watching Star Wars. They just watch it on the big screen whenever they want. For me, the most amazing thing, apart from the Beatles, was Star Wars. The feeling I got seeing that as an 8-year-old.
Same. We all experience. We're all closely the same age, obviously.
Yeah.
It's interesting you're describing that. I don't want to cut your thought off, but I remember not being able to afford the albums, and I'd go down to the local record shop when I was a kid, and Mum would be doing the groceries, and I'd run across the road to this little record store, and they were $8.99, $8.99.
Yeah.
$12,
and I still remember seeing the cover to Rubber Soul, and flipping it over and seeing these beautiful Robert Freeman black and whites. And then looking at the song titles. I can still remember being a kid going, what's in... I don't even know what this is now. And then waiting to get Rubber Soul. And then for the first time hearing Wait and the changes that are going on in there. That's
another great song with a middle eight.
The excitement of having that art in your hands, not knowing what's in it, and then hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, that's and having it in your hands rather than listening to it just on a Spotify digital access. So you've got no.
There was the anticipation of, I don't know what this is going to be. I can't wait to get to it.
Yes.
Rather than, I don't need to wait for anything.
Yeah,
that's right. So we've in this completely different world now where it's snap your fingers. I want this,
and you've got it,
and I've got the adventures and the pre-excitement doesn't exist. It's hard to...
Yeah, and it's not the kid's fault.
No, it's technology.
It's just life.
That's just the way it is.
What about for you, Shaun, if you had to pick an album that you would go back to easily again and again?
I always say it's Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul's my favourite, but I love I love the early albums too. I love With the Beatles. That's a great album.
Is it just me? Do you find, maybe it's because we're over familiar, do you find that the albums sound and feel precisely what the art cover is telling you?
It's because it's just
we've associated it.
Yeah, it's just how we associate it.
But I've always thought the production of Rubber Soul was it in a Beatles book we had years ago? I can't recall the name of it. And there was a chapter written about Rubber Soul, and the chapter was called Wood and Smoke.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went, yeah, that's what that album is.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you can put the turntable, if the turntable was on a wooden stump and you put the needle on it, you're listening to it out in the forest.
I mean, you've got Norwegian wood going there, so that really helps you towards that.
But then I remember hearing With the Beatles, and the With the Beatles, to me, always sounded darker. It sounded like they were in polos, those songs.
Yeah.
And the cover art, again, connects to that. But for me, the production for that album felt like the package.
Yeah,
and obviously you get to Pepper. And then, of course, with White Album, it's
back to rock and roll.
We don't want to tell you anything with the cover art
because we're not sure ourselves.
No. And that is why that's also an important album as well.
And what a great album, getting the White Album and getting the photos and the poster.
Are you kidding? Yeah, all those gifts.
It's just like it's like gifts. It's like, how good is this? They've gone to the and you're thinking it's the Beatles. They're just going that again, the extra mile for you.
Yeah. First time I heard Helter Skelter, I thought it wasn't off the White Album. It was on a little cassette that my sister brought back from Thailand, and it's the first song. And I'm like, what the hell is this? This is not the Beatles. This surely cannot be them. It was just so removed from anything that they'd done. And I was like, gee, I mean, I love it, but what is it? And the next song, it was all just a compilation thing.
I'd still vouch that there's nothing heavier than that before. Even the Who before weren't doing nothing as heavy as Helter Skelter.
No. I mean, that was
let alone Revolution number 9. Even though me and Michael used to turn the light off of that. I have to say, because I'll forget to mention it. We used to turn the light off and listen to Revolution.
To see how long we could stay in the room with the lights out.
And all that sort of.
But as I've gotten older...
Never done that. I should try that.
As I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate that and go, well, that took guts as well. We've done every other form of music. We're now going to do this.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate it now as art.
Do you know I throw in a little bit of Revolution 9 at the end of I Am the Warriors?
You do always do something.
I do a little bit of Yoko,
We become
naked. I throw that. Carl, you do Thor. We become naked. Because why not,
There's an Easter egg for any fans that follow the band. I remember, it's funny you talked about getting that tape. I remember Mum bringing me home. I was, again, about 9 and just discovering the music. And it was the Tony Sheridan tapes. Oh. And, of course, you hear...
My Body.
You hear H.C. Sweet with it's clearly Lennon. And then I hear, take some insurance out on me, baby. And I'm hearing, why?
Yeah. Why did you love me this way?
Not a bad track.
Whatever it is.
So I remember sitting there listening to it and going back to myself saying, this is not the Beatles. Because I had no books, I had no idea. And I'm being so disappointed and upset. It's not the Beatles.
They're the backing band.
But the cassette told you none of that. And had a picture of them from
Of course not. Otherwise it'd still be on the shelf.
That's right. So it was a picture of them from Pepper era, the Beatles, and then it was all the Tony Sheridan stuff. And now when you're 9 years old, what is... Yeah. What is... What is this? Okay, we're almost at the end of our time together. If people were looking to find the Beatlegs...
Turn left at Greenland.
Look, can you answer this? Are you mods or rockers?
No, we're mockers.
Where would people find the Beatlegs?
Moccachinos.
Yeah. You'd find us on stage. No,
that's perfect.
Yes. We'll muck show for you. No,
on,
you
get
can
up
find
there.
us.
Come on, get up
I
there.
like what I'm hearing.
Anyway, for big fans, we're quoting Birth of the Beatles, which might even come up when we do future episodes and talk about it.
It was a big part of it. It was a big part because he used to watch it like we did religiously when it first came on TV.
On VHS tape?
Line,
yeah. He did the same thing. He was sit there watching it. He said he used to watch the art part, especially the art show.
The life painting.
Yeah. We painted the model, sir. It was a big job.
So stupid.
I think my favourite line, doctor.
I want to cut off
your hair. Does all of this make you wonder where we're going?
Yeah.
Best not think about it, son. Best not. People die here never knowing if they've ever lived.
Yeah.
Look.
You won't catch me working 9 to 5.
I been thinking about a change in leadership.
Have you, Paul?
I think you should get stuffed.
I remember there's a line in that film where they recreate, as a Dick Clark film, for those that maybe aren't aware of it, 1979, I think it was. And there's a recreation of the press conference when they land in the States. And the reporter says, will people remember the Beatles in 10 years from now? And Steve McKenna, who plays John Lennon, says, they'll never be able to forget us.
Yeah.
And I remember playing that movie again and again at home, and I had my auntie Frida visiting. We hadn't seen her for years. And all weekend I'm just playing The Birth of the Beatles. You know, I'm a kid. And that line comes on. And I remember her sitting in the lounge room going, no, we'll never forget you, because he keeps playing this bloody movie every single hour of the day. Because it was always on.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking for the Beatlegs, you're playing around the Gold Coast, Queensland, here in Australia where we are. Where will people find you?
Facebook's probably the best place. That I really should start posting some more of the gigs.
Well, you're the social guy, right? You look after all that?
Yeah. Paul Verney. Paul Bugger, he's very busy.
You sound like Paul McCartney, not really taking responsibility for Magical Mystery Tour.
You're stalling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have come up with the initial idea.
Might have. No, I think it was more George.
Yeah, so you look after the socials?
Right.
Well, I don't know if I look after them.
But sometimes I will post a date. But yes, we will be posting the dates that we do play, and
Perfect.
so yeah, Facebook's the place to go. The Beatlegs on Facebook.
And that's BEATLEGS, LEGS.
The Beatlegs.
Yeah, the
with
big
egg.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific,
right.
mate. Thank you.
The Beatlegs.
Yeah, there you go. You're onto something. The Eggmen.
Yeah, we are the Eggmen. Well, I'm not. I'm the Walrus.
Oh, jeez. Shaun,
You.
closing thoughts before we wrap up. The Beatlegs, are we going to hear you guys playing it for another 10, 15 years? How long do you think you'll stick with it?
Oh, you
You can get big-headed and say
you're going to last for years, but then, you're lucky to last 3 months.
I think we'll either be in the business,
Yeah.
between now or the next 3 or 4 years.
I know, we're just, mate, honestly, we're just going, we're just going, whatever goes. It's got to a point now where, when the gigs roll in, we get it together and we go and do it. But
get it together.
we can get it together. We can get it together now.
Hey,
And that's all.
That's it,
okay.
We're just a band, when we break up, people, they can just reminisce. If they want, they've got the albums to reminisce.
You've got the old records there if you want to
Yeah.
go back and play.
But we're not going to break up in a real hurry. Are you going to break up? No, we're
actually,
not breaking.
I do look. I really my going out is now doing the Beatlegs gig, and I really enjoy playing with these guys. And what better thing to do on a night? Say if it's a Friday night, a Saturday night, or something. It's like, hey, cool. I'm going in to play some Beatle music on stage to a crowd of people tonight.
Yeah,
So-
who love it
Why?
as much as we do.
It's great.
It's joy.
Truly, yeah, it is joy, and I'm blessed to be still doing it because honestly, from where we are now, I honestly thought it would have faded off a while ago. But so yeah, very happy and content that we are still doing it, eh?
We hope you enjoyed the show. You know the name, look up the socials. You'll find us on Facebook and Instagram where we can all come together. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe and spread the word. It all helps raise the profile of the You Can Talk to Me podcast. Thanks for listening.